Hello, my name is Diane, and it's officially the last quarter of the year. It's autumn here. The weather has definitely been feeling like it. On the first day of autumn, the weather just suddenly changed. The temperature dropped. It was rainy and so windy for days. The sun finally came out. I'm not quite ready for the cold yet, but it is time to check in on how my reading goals are going, how my reading's been this year, and I'm looking at what I'm going to be reading and doing for the final quarter of the year. So let's start with checking in on the goals that I set at the beginning of the year and how I'm doing with them. The first of those goals was to read 52 books. I've already hit this at this point. I'm about 70 books read, and then about a dozen or so DNFs, books that I read various amounts of and decided I don't want to finish them ever, and then I have a handful of other books that I have started and I am planning to finish, whether I'm actively reading them right now or just set them aside for a little bit while I read other things. I'm feeling pretty good about this considering the last month and a half maybe, I haven't really been reading that much. Not a whole lot has been holding my attention with stories right now, which is a little frustrating because there are a lot of things that I'm excited to read. It's just having the bandwidth to read them. There are a lot of longer, denser stories that I'm reading right now. So it's been a little frustrating to kind of switch gears and have to slow down my pace of how I'm consuming books. But I am really enjoying the books that I am reading right now, so I guess it's just a trade-off I have to make. Still seeing how many total books I've read for the year makes me feel a little bit better because I have read quite a bit. My next goal was to finish series when I start them, and I feel really good about this. I'm only actively reading a couple of series. I just got back into the Ender Saga by Orson Scott Card, which is kind of two series that happen simultaneously. I'm reading both of them together. And I'm also about to get back into the Odd Thomas series. And other than that, most of the series that I'm currently reading are ones that I'm caught up on as far as how many books are released, but they're still ongoing series, so I'm waiting for the next installment to come out whenever that is, which is completely out of my control, but I've read pretty much all of the books in the series I'm currently reading that are published right now. The next goal is to read my physical TBR, and I have not been doing very good at this. I only have about a handful of fantasy fiction books left, and then I have quite a few nonfiction books, and I was doing really well at this, and I think once I caught sight at the end of the number of books I had to read, I really slowed down and stopped prioritizing them, and that's kind of fine with the fantasy books, although they are books that I really want to read. So I do need to prioritize those going into the end of the year. I also need to get better at reading the nonfiction because I do like nonfiction and I'm interested in the nonfiction books I have, obviously, but prioritizing them in my reading when I'm picking up what to read next, I'm much more likely to pick up a fiction book than I am a nonfiction book, even though I tend to enjoy the nonfiction once I actually read them. So I do need to get better about that for the last few months of the year and try and knock out as many of those as I can, because I don't like having a bunch of books that I haven't read on my shelves. The next goal was to be more reasonable with my reading plans, and I think I've gotten pretty good about this to the point where I don't think I want to make TBRs anymore. I've been doing monthly TBRs for about a year and a half, and while I was enjoying them and having some sort of focus going into the month, I just haven't been enjoying following them for the last few months, and then I feel kind of bad if I don't stick to them by the end of the month, if I haven't read anything off my TBR or if only read one thing. So I think the best solution is to just stop making them, stop putting that expectation of myself of you have to read these books this month and then you can read other stuff. I've been liking just reading whatever I feel like and just kind of mood reading. I do still have a general TBR that I'm planning to make my way through eventually, but I'd much rather just be able to pick off of that longer list of whatever I'm in the mood for. A lot of it is series at this point, so picking what kind of series, what type of story I'm in the mood for, or if I want to read a new release, or if it's something I heard about that I wasn't planning on reading comes up that I'm really excited about, I want to have the flexibility to do that and not feel like I'm neglecting an expectation that I set for myself. So I think I'm good at this goal, but I think it's led me to getting rid of monthly TBRs, at least for a while. Maybe they'll come back. Maybe I'll just mood read forever. We'll see. And my final goal is to interact with the book community more. And I feel like this is a goal that I'm always going to feel like I could be doing more, but I'm much more comfortable just chatting with other people about books and interacting with other creators, which was really the point of this goal, is to get more comfortable if I feel like I have a comment to share, to just share it and not feel anxious about it or anything. So I think I've hit this. I think I would like to keep interacting more, but as far as getting more comfortable, which was the purpose of this goal, I think I've definitely done that. So those are all the goals I set at the beginning of the year. I feel really good about where I'm at with them. I just need to focus more on my own shelves and my nonfiction collection, which I think is something I can easily do going into the end of the year, even if I don't make it through all of them, which ideally I would in the next 3 months. But if I don't, I'd at least like to get more in the habit of choosing from my owned books until I get through the last of them, because I'm just so close. So goals aside, let's just talk about some of the things I've read this year and things I'm going to read for the rest of the year. Every month this year I've been picking my favorite read of the month, so not necessarily my favorite books of the year, but out of whatever I read that month, what were my favorites. I did this for my mid-year check-in, which you can check out if you want to see my picks for the first half of the year. But for the third quarter, for July, August, and September, these books were my favorites. For July, my favorite read was Lights by Brenna Thumler. This is the third and final installment in the Sheet series, which is a graphic novel series about a teenage girl who meets the ghost of a young boy. They become very good friends and help each other with the things that they're going through in their lives, and then they meet a third friend, Eliza, who is also going through some things herself, and it's just a really sweet and charming story, kind of heartbreaking but very heartwarming to see the friendship of these three characters grow and them deal with their own things throughout each installment. For August, my favorite read was Morgan Is My Name by Sophie Keach. This is an Arthurian retelling focusing on the earlier life of Morgan Le Fay. I really like Arthurian retellings. I've always really liked the character of Morgan and just the general main cast of Arthurian retellings. And I think focusing on Morgan's earlier years and having some of the other main characters as side characters and not really too significant. It's primarily about Morgan and her discovering her power and her search for knowledge. She's very interested in learning and healing and things like that. And it's not something she's really supposed to be interested in. So I think this was a really interesting story. I think it was really well written. It was very engaging for me. And it was kind of a pleasant surprise because you never really know what you're going to get with a retelling, if it's going to improve on the story that you already know, or if it's going to just be more information, another writing style telling you the same things you already know. But this one was one that I really enjoyed. And then for September, also the last book that I finished was Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card. This is the sequel to Ender's Game. I thought this was a really interesting story. It's not super exciting, although there is a lot of creative, interesting things happening. There's kind of an exploration of this new species and learning about their culture and the way that they do things, the way they interact with humans and the relationship there after everything that happened at the end of Ender's Game. And the edition that I read also had an author's note where Orson Scott Card said that this was the story that he always intended to tell, but he had to write Ender's Game first to get there. And Ender's Game is so well known within sci-fi. I thought that was really interesting. Note that it was really just a stepping stone to get to Speaker of the Dead. And I do think it was definitely not a story for everyone. There's not a lot of action. It's kind of just about humanity and cultures and exploring those topics within this world, but I thought it was really interesting. I'm excited to see where we go with this series because there are quite a few books left. For a new release that I still want to read that came out this year is Paradise 1 by David Wellington. This is a thriller sci-fi. I think it's going to be more horror than thriller, about a colony that they haven't heard anything from in a while, so a team is sent to investigate what happened there, figure out if everyone's okay and it's just their communication, or if something happened to the people that were there. It sounds like it might be kind of scary, but I tend to like more thriller-leaning sci-fis, so I'm excited to get into this one, hopefully soon. It's the type of sci-fi that I tend to like, and it's also kind of what I've been craving reading, is that thriller sci-fi. It is a long one though, so I hope it's able to keep up that tone, that intrigue throughout. I'm not really sure what to expect. I don't know what the horror element is going to be. And for a new release that hasn't come out yet, I'm most looking forward to Before We Say Goodbye by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the 4th installment in Before the Coffee Gets Cold. The book is already out, but it's coming out in English in November. I've really liked this series so far. I'm not really sure what to expect with this next installment. I'm a little nervous that it's just going to feel like more of the same because the setup of each of the books so far has basically been the same. It's in this cafe where people can travel through time by sitting in a specific seat so that they can meet with someone else who has been at that cafe. It's always someone specific, usually someone that they've lost in their life, that they just want to have one last interaction with, even though it's not going to change anything that's happened or will happen. It's just a chance for them to say something or hear something or just see them one last time. And I just think it's an interesting topic to explore. Why would people want to do that? Why would people want to put themselves through that emotionally? And what might someone hope to get out? I think it's an interesting thing to think about. Definitely not a series for everyone, but some of the stories have really stood out to me. Have been specific situations that I've resonated with, so I'm interested to see what types of people and situations we get in the next book. My most disappointing read of last quarter, I feel a little bad saying this because I did enjoy this book, but it wasn't quite what I had hoped it would be, and that's Witch King by Martha Wells. This is her latest fantasy release, and I've only read the Murderbot Diaries from her before, and I've really enjoyed that series. So I was excited to try out her fantasy, and I figured her newest fantasy probably going to be pretty good. But it was a very interesting story, but it took a little while to get settled into the world and the plot and what was going on. Once things really started coming together, I was really enjoying it. I would say about halfway through, which tends to be a thing that bothers me in books when you have to really work to get to the good stuff, and that's how I felt about this book. Although I did like seeing everything come together by the end, and I do think it was a really interesting plot and world, I was disappointed that it took a while to get to the good stuff and to see everything finally come together. And where I was so anticipating this is what made it really disappointing, that it wasn't really good from the get-go. So I liked it, but I didn't like it nearly as much as I had expected to. On the other side of that, my biggest surprise was Gods of the Weirdwood by R.J. Barker. This is the first book in his newest series. This is also the first book of R.J. Barker's that I've read. I was expecting to like this, and I was looking forward to it, but it was so much more atmospheric and interesting than I had expected it to be. I really liked the main character, and I liked his relationship with the world. The world is very magical, and the setting is explored quite a bit. And I really enjoyed that. I think it was written very well to make that work. As you're slowly seeing the plot unfold, you're getting to know the world and these characters, and I liked their interactions with each other. It was just a lot of small things that worked really well together for me that made this story as intriguing and interesting as it was. And I was expecting more of an adventure-focused story than such a magical, atmospheric story, which for me was a pleasant surprise. So going into the end of the year, I do still have some new releases I'm looking forward to, of course. I'm going to try and focus more on getting through the rest of my own books that I haven't read, as well as getting through more of the Ender Saga series. Hopefully some new releases from earlier in the year that I haven't gotten around to yet, and kind of just wrapping up some things that I'd like to have finished before we start the new year. Next year I have already started looking at reading-wise, but I do have quite a list of series that I've been waiting to start. I was trying to get through all the series I was currently reading, and now that I'm finally caught up, I feel like I can start more series and make my way through all the ones that I've been waiting to get to start. So that's most of my reading plans for next year. I do have a few authors that I discovered this year that were new to me, that have some older books that I would like to read and read more of their writing. That's pretty much my plan for the final quarter, getting through those series, my own books, the new releases that I haven't gotten to yet that I'm still very excited about. But at this point, I feel like it's been a very good reading year. I found a lot of new authors that I've really loved, new books that are new favorites for me. I'm excited to just get a little more of that before the year ends and we wrap everything up for the year. So that's all for me today. Let me know how your reading is going, how you're doing with your goals, whatever they may be. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.